If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge, from worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
I got a gray hair and they call it Harris now. Oh, this election is stressing me out. How are y'all doing? We'll be all right. I think.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Lara, host of Radical Acts Uncut. I'm a creative, an entrepreneur, and CEO of Impact PR. Today, I'm speaking with lawyers and comedians Jasmine Burton and Elizabeth Booker Houston. At the time of this recording, they had just completed their multi-city Together We Might comedy tour. I actually had the pleasure of attending their final stop in DC the night before Election Day, and they join me now to share more. Welcome.
Hey, I'm happy to be here.
So great to have you guys.
I don't know about you guys, but when I watched the footage back from the show that we did the day before the election, I just felt so loud and wrong, which was shocking.
Yeah, no, being in the room, it felt like magical, like a snapshot of like happiness, and the room was so diverse. And even the friend I was with, like, we didn't want any segments to end.
Yeah.
And so it was really great. Elizabeth, could you start by just giving a description of the tour?
Sure. So it was Jasmine and myself. Definitely had comedy intertwined in there, but we were also talking about politics and specifically this election. And it ran from October 5th until November 4th. So up until the night before the election. So like we said, the finale was in Washington, D.C. And we were basically just trying to talk about politics in a way that entertained folks. The best way I've described it is like Daily Show Live, but with two Black women and more cussing. So
I love that. Great, great, great. And for starters, I'd love for you both to share, first of all, what drew you to comedy and what it was like the first time you took the stage.
Yeah, it's funny that Elizabeth mentioned The Daily Show because that's always what I've ideated my end goal being. And when you watch people like Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, James Corden, Trevor Noah, a lot of those people got their start in comedy. And so I'm thinking, okay, if this is my end goal, maybe I can get there by doing comedy. I never anticipated actually loving comedy. I always anticipated it being a means to an end. But from the moment that I did it the first time, I have just been hooked. I feel like it sounds very cliche, but I genuinely loved it ever since. And so now I find myself having to remember to do, educative segments or more content creation about the law, about politics, about policy, and all of those things, because I've just genuinely spent so much time joke writing and performing. But additionally, or originally when I started, it was mostly a means to an end, I would have assumed. What about you, Liz?
So I was already a content creator before I decided to get into stand-up comedy, but I'd always wanted to try stand-up because I already did similar things. Like I've done nerd night performances in both Memphis and DC, which is where you have experts come live on stage in front of an audience and nerd out. It's kind of almost like the PowerPoint presentation trend before it became a trend. And so they would book experts and you're just kind of funny about it. And so like, I think my first presentation was like the Marvel Universe and civil rights. And I talked about civil rights law through the lens of like comic books. I talked about working in public health law and like the zombie apocalypse. So I was the class speaker at my law school graduation. And it was just the entire time me making jokes because I didn't want to sit through a dry, boring speech. And I know nobody else wanted to either. So I've always been interested in comedy, and in particular, I liked stand-up. And while Jasmine says that like Daily Show was her inspiration, mine was the Kings of Comedy. Oh. So that's what made me say, okay, let me go ahead and get on stage. and I ended up liking it. And so I just kept doing stand-up. It was not really a huge thought process or any kind of plan. It's just, if I enjoy this thing, I'm going to keep doing it. That's pretty much it.
That's very bold for both of you guys. And can you, Jasmine, actually say the exact moment? How long have you been doing stand-up?
It'll be 3 years in May for me, which is kind of insane. It feels like so much longer than that, but it's only been almost 3 years.
Okay. And I think one of the things that's interesting is that with comedy, you can talk about politics and really tough topics. And I've had a chance to see you perform 4 times now, and you open up your sets each time mentioning that you're sober and the length of your sobriety. And I think right there, that's an example of getting right to a tough topic.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, it's almost funny because my sobriety date almost directly coincides with my start of comedy date. And they're only about 3 months apart. I start off my set with mentioning that I'm sober because I have so many jokes about my sobriety. It's actually probably my favorite jokes that I tell. I'm also a firm believer in letting the audience know who you are up front. Sometimes if you try to push them in one direction and then heavily detour to another, they're confused. They don't know really who you are, your identity. But I'm very inclined to tell my most edgy, punchy, risque jokes in the beginning. So you know who I am as soon as I step on the stage. But I am intentional about mentioning things about me because a lot of my comedy is about certain aspects of myself, whether that be my relationship status, my sobriety, my job. So a lot of those things I do mention intentionally in the beginning of my set.
Yeah, I think authenticity is key. And Elizabeth, with your set at the show, it was interesting. You also got to a really tough issue when you were talking about how you have your husband track you on your phone because of jokes that you say, and you need to make sure that you're safe. But then you go into the fact that you also just don't want to end up being a missing Black woman. It's not funny, but you make it funny. But can you also just kind of talk a little bit again about how comedy and social content creation allows you to talk about really tough topics?
Yeah, I've always kind of leaned toward dark comedy. My very first stand-up set was me making fun of the fact that my brother was murdered. And one of my viral videos early on TikTok was making fun of the fact that my brother was murdered. We did a sibling rating thing. It was a trend where you'd rate your siblings and then you'd not, out of 10. And people would knock off points for silly things or make jokes about their siblings. So I went through all 3 of my sisters, and I would just be yeah, she's cool, whatever. But I think with my sister Indian, I was she had the good sense to be a lesbian and not deal with men. So 7 out of 10, different things like that. And then I got to my brother and I was yeah, he's really cool, baby of the family, awesome videographer, photographer, but he just up and died one day. So 4 out of 10, what the hell? And people thought it was so funny. And especially people who had lost people and who had lost siblings. And just really, it was something that folks could resonate with, especially in the time of COVID where people were getting sick and dying. And there are a lot of folks who were new to grief. And I talked a lot about, I don't know, those dark things in a humorous way because a lot of people had never dealt with those feelings before. Whereas I said that it was interesting because watching the world go through a global pandemic was like seeing everything stop and slow down and get sad, and the world feeling what I had already felt 3 years before. Because, I don't know, grief is just kind of that universal thing. So that led to also talking about difficult topics when it comes to politics, especially with everything going on now. I have had absolutely no pause in my content posting because of the outcome of the election. I'm still continuing to post and also try to make jokes and be silly where I can, because I think that humor can be a palate cleanser for people as well.
Yes, yes. And I am sorry about your brother's passing.
Well, thank you.
Yes. And can you also just share how the 2 of you guys met? Because there is power in creative pairs. And, from watching the show, you guys definitely complement each other. And so I'd love to hear about how you guys collaborated.
Yeah, white male bookers can't tell us apart. So they kept thinking we were each other. They were like, oh yeah, you're the same 5'10" Black lawyer comedian. Yeah. So after that kept happening and people kept mixing us up, I straight up got booked for something because somebody thought I was her. Jasmine, it was Tony Woods. Tony Woods booked me for a show because he thought I was you. And then he was like, oh, you're not the same person, but you're funny too. And then I just was there. Like, so funny to me. But yeah, so then we were like, oh, we got to meet. And then we did, and we clicked, and that was that.
We clicked immediately. And so many people ask us if there's like competition between Black women in the space. There was none of that when I met Liz. We immediately clicked. We immediately looked out for each other. We wanted to be on all the shows together. We wanted to be together. And so it's been so nice to have a friend that is so similar to me in this scene as well. It's been such a safe space and safe haven.
Yeah, I'll say the same. Jasmine's a really, really good, like, supportive person, especially this particular time. I mean, it's stressful. And I don't know who else I'd want to do shows about with the most, like, stressful election I've ever dealt with in my life.
Right.
Yes. And, that even speaks to the Kelly brothers. Tom and David Kelly they are from IDEO, and they speak about the power of creative pairs and how complementary skill sets work. And I know that, Jasmine, you were doing a lot of improv during the show, and Elizabeth, you're like a mental encyclopedia. And so again, there's that aspect of complementing each other.
Oh, totally. I'm never going to out-knowledge Liz. Like, she is a powerhouse when it comes to knowing things, knowing facts. She's like a living encyclopedia. I think we both have our very like distinct lanes, and it works perfectly. Like, I stay in mine, she's in hers, and we just gel. I think Liz has been inspiring to me, especially on this tour, because she is not only interested in like national and state level politics, but local level politics. She's on the ground. She's speaking with the people. She's donating to causes directly. She's doing all of that work. Whereas me, I'm a little too mentally bogged down to sometimes be involved directly in the work. And so a lot of what I do is escapism, which is like, okay, we've had our hard work day. How do we think about everything else other than that? And so it's like been the perfect blend, because we're talking about difficult issues in a way that's funny and lighthearted and brings people like me to still feel safe in the space. Like, hey, I know a lot, but sometimes I get scared. Sometimes I get anxious. Can I crack a joke? Is that okay? Like, so it's a safe space for both types of people, which I think is great.
It's like downplaying herself, because as you can see from the show, Jasmine is crazy smart. And even though like I have a weird hyper focus into a lot of this stuff, she can pick up on it fast. That's a skill, to like sit there and have somebody tell you about something that you didn't know about before, and to be able to quickly analyze it on stage in front of everybody and also make a joke about it is an insanely strong skill. And Jasmine does a lot of that. She can think on her toes. She will argue with me, but she is by far a funnier comedian than I am, 100%, which is why I want to be around her, because she's so
Liz,
fun to be
I love
around.
You.
Oh, I love you too. Yeah, she's wildly talented, and she has more comedic writing skills, I swear to God, in her pinky than most of these people who've been in comedy for years have in their entire bodies. Sitting next to her on a flight while she's just sitting there and writing out hilarious jokes while I'm just like trying to not throw up because I get nauseous from the turbulence is a crazy skill.
Yeah, I just love the sisterhood and the support. I also, though, want to, Liz, spotlight you in terms of like, you break down crazy legislation in such a layman term that like I could understand, and I feel like the entire room can. And during the show, there was like, you went off like a freestyle, but everything made sense. And so I don't even know a little bit about your process of downloading the information, but it's a skill to be able to, make it palatable to the people.
I don't know. I have a weird brain. That's just the way my husband describes it. He's like, my wife has a weird brain. I was with a couple of folks the other night, content creators who you may have come across who are also been at the DNC, V from Under the Desk News, and Eve from Gemma Talks, who does reproductive rights content. And we were sitting and we were kind of decompressing and like doing a little postmortem analysis of the election down in Alexandria while just like hanging out and eating appetizers and having drinks and stuff. And I went off on a long tangent, and Eve was just like, it's really funny because you really do just talk like that, and you don't do it just for the video camera. And I was like, no, I really do just talk like that. So when I set the phone up and just like talk like that in a one-shot video, I'm like, yeah, that's how it goes. But I think it's just because I'm so angry about so much stuff. So I think that's just it. I don't know. I'm driven by a lot of anger and trying to turn that into something useful rather than, I don't know, beating up people and going to jail.
That's a good choice. And do you feel like there's something, you guys are both lawyers. Do you feel like there's something unique about the legal field that translates to comedy?
I think that people come to comedy shows for a multitude of different reasons. I think the underestimated reason is that people want to learn. People want to feel like they can relate to you based on their own experience. They want to learn about yours. They want to learn about an interesting topic in a funny way. And so I feel like people find it intriguing to learn about things that particularly they don't know about or knowledge that they don't have access to. It's why when a comedian is a doctor, there's like 3 doctors and nurse comedians right now that are just gaining millions and millions of followers, but it's because it's a field we don't really know about, but we experience every single day. All of us have to go get a checkup and don't know nothing about what the doctor is saying to us. And so it's funny to hear those things. Same with teacher comedians. All of us have a teacher that we loved, that we grew up with, that we hated. And so when we hear those stories, they're hilarious to us. It's same with being a lawyer. People crave that type of knowledge and information because it's not something that they see in their day-to-day life. I have one lawyer joke where I go through the phases of a case, but the way that I make it digestible is I do it about dating. And so I talk about how I determine who my suitor is going to be, and I go through all of the phases of a case, starting from like the initial hearing to the verdict. And so people think it's like topical, it's just another dating joke, but actually I just taught you like 9 different phases in one comedy set. And so again, I think people underestimate how much audiences crave knowledge, which is what we bring. What do you think, Liz?
I fully agree. And I think that it's also unique with the legal field compared to like being a doctor or something like that. The law was not designed for experts. It was not supposed to be this way. It's supposed to be something that every single person has access to in order to understand their rights, which is why you can go in and file something pro se in court, right? There's no requirement that you have to have an attorney for different things. You know, if you are convicted of a crime and you can't afford an attorney, one will be provided for you, but you can defend yourself. Is that a good idea? Probably not, because what has happened is they have gate kept this knowledge from the public in order to make money off of it. And so I think that, like, while I agree with everything you're saying, like, it's like people crave knowledge, but it's also like with the law specifically, this is a level of knowledge that is not supposed to be kept from the public. It's not supposed to be with the select few, this small elite group of people, but it is. And so that is one of those things that I feel like it makes people really, really interested and intrigued by that. Like, however it's woven into comedy or a TV show or music or whatever, having any sort of legal and political topic just presented to people in a way that, I don't know, meets them where they're at is very intriguing to people, just because it's really not supposed to be set up this way, but it was done intentionally in order for a small group of people to have power.
Yeah, well said. And you both have jobs, day jobs, in addition to your careers as comedians and content creators. Elizabeth, you're a wife and mother. You both churn out content consistently and perform regularly. How do you blend and balance all of these roles?
I don't. I mean, I try. I mean, I do. I think I have excellent time management skills, which I think I get from being a college athlete. I wish that the answer was like a little deeper. It was more so just I actually love to go out and party. And so I wanted to be able to do all of those things while also doing my schoolwork and making sure that I was at practice on time. And so I take that same approach to being a comedian, like, and a lawyer, so that I have time for all of the things and don't allow myself to be super stressed. The one thing that I'm still trying to figure out how to adequately blend is how to talk about my job on stage. I think that is like the most interesting part. Like, even people's favorite jokes are when I talk about my job, but sometimes it's like, that's my job. Like, where I don't have any fun. Why are you guys don't want to have fun laughing at it? So, but it's the part people care about. So that's the thing I'm still trying to blend, is how to talk about more of what I do on stage. But in regards to just balancing all the things, still trying to find that perfect balance. But again, I think just time management and organization helps go a long way.
All right, cool. And Liz, what about you?
So privilege. People say that all the time. I had somebody like tell me once, and they were just like, oh, we all have the same hours in a day and you're really maximizing them. No, privilege. Just 100%. My job allows me to work from home. My husband works from home. My aunt provides in-home childcare. And now we're currently under contract for a house that has a guest house in the back where my aunt can just live there. And so my son can have his childcare and his aunt and support like literally right there. I have a husband who is not at all incompetent and doesn't engage in weaponized incompetence. And I can go out of town and not like, if I go out of town for a week for the DNC, my husband isn't left with like a list. He knows how to parent our child to the same capacity that I do, right? There's even, it's sad to say, privilege in that, because if you talk to a lot of women who are married to men and who have children, they typically are carrying the mental load of the family and all of that stuff. Having a child who, although has a disability, is a fairly easy child. I mean, that's a privilege in itself. I mean, that's what it all comes down to. There's probably somebody out there who was born with the same crazy brain as myself and could do all of these things if they had money and opportunity and support. So, I mean, there's a lot going on, and yeah, I balance it out. But they're really, honestly, I really don't like playing like the privilege side of things. Like, yeah, it's a lot easier to manage and run around when you can like have meal delivery service or like a housekeeper come to your house and handle basic tasks, like just to be blunt and straightforward and honest, because I really hate it when you see white men who rise up in the industry and just completely neglect that fact. Or like we see it all the time, especially with like male comedians who have wives and kids at home, and it's just like, wow, you're amazing, all this stuff. It's like, yeah, and his wife is doing all this stuff in the background, stuff like that. And so I don't know, that's just maybe not like the most inspiring answer, but it really is just the truth. There's so much that many people could do if they had the means to do so.
Yeah, no, it's real. And, I appreciate the honesty in terms of making it all happen. And this next question, Jasmine, you started to get to it a little bit in your previous answer. When you think back to your childhood or earlier times, is there an event or something about your upbringing that you believe contributed to your boldness and courage?
Oh, 1000%. My parents are the absolute best. And I think the thing that I've always remembered in life, my mom is an exceptional woman. And she has always deeply instilled in me that I can do anything I want to, that I put my mind to, and my dad as well. Like, I almost think that I'm like so overzealous because never in my life have they told me that I couldn't be anything I wanted to do. I used to come to them with the most outlandish ideas. They were like, they never at any point thought, and it's not like the parent thing where you're like, oh, you can do it. But like, they genuinely believed that I could accomplish it. Outside of that, there was one instance that I had with my mom in the grocery store. And I remember it like the back of my hand. We were walking. A woman bumped into me. I was like maybe 8 or 9. She was an older white woman. I said, I'm sorry, my fault. And the woman didn't apologize at all. My mom snatched me up and said, that is not your fault. You never apologize to white women who bump into you because they keep doing that. And I was like, okay. Not only that, she made me go back up to the white woman and make her apologize to me for bumping into me. Because Celeste don't play. So it's moments like that where my mom has always taught me to demand respect and to never let anyone disrespect you and to never apologize. Black women were so conditioned to apologize for other people's mistakes. My mom has never allowed me to do that. And I think that's why I'm so bold in comedy. I think that's why I'm so bold in my work, bold in my relationships, everything, because that's how I was raised.
Love that. And Elizabeth, you, the same question. When you think back to your childhood, event or experience, something that you feel contributes to your boldness and courage?
It goes back to the fact that I grew up in poverty and I was really sick. I got diagnosed with a lot of chronic illnesses when I was about 2. So all of my early memories are from being in a hospital. I remember like my sister, I'd get like hospitalized on like Halloween all the time, and she would go trick-or-treating for me and stuff. But I was in like the ER in the hospital like every month. And I was on Medicaid, Tennessee's version of Medicaid, which is TennCare. And it was around like 8 years old when I started to conceptualize insurance and what it meant, and also learned that people wanted to take Medicaid away, politicians wanting to cut it, and thinking about, my God, these people don't care if I live or die just because I don't have money. And it was when I was 9 years old that I decided I was going to work in health policy and work in politics to fight against all of those right-wing concepts. And it just made me so upset. And then this is so silly, but like the real moment that made it like visceral for me was seeing the movie John Q. I saw the movie John Q with Denzel Washington when I was 9, and he talked about HMOs, and he sat there and he held that hospital hostage because his son needed a heart or he was going to die. And I connected it so closely with like my situation and the situation of other people. And it was like, oh my God, like it was a visual of like, this is what happens just because of how you happen to be born or the family you have to be born in or conditions you happen to have, even from childhood. And so that became my Roman Empire, like, and has been ever since. So that was really just the thing that just really stuck with me. And I'm really happy that so many years later that's what I do. I'm really glad I stuck to it. But yeah, that's you got when you in a hospital, you can't really do much. So you spend a lot of time reading and a lot of time watching TV. I remember sometimes like C-SPAN coming up, I was little and you'd be flipping through and see the news and see things and seeing and taking in a lot of information that a little kid maybe shouldn't have been, but I'm glad I did. And also you learn to have a slick mouth because when you are tiny and sickly, you cannot fight. So I learned to make people cry with my words because it was a good minute before I could actually physically fight somebody.
Yes, I love that. I identify with the John Q movie as well. I have a child who has type 1, so I always identify with, I'll have a John Q moment. If I need to get some insulin, I will have a John Q moment. But
Yep.
I love also the specificity of both of you guys' moments. It's so specific, and I feel like that's unique to comedians. But also on the show, we unpack tests. And I'd love to know if there was an unexpected test that you each navigated during your comedy tour that would surprise the other person if they knew.
Oh.
That's such an interesting question. For me, I went through a breakup right before tour started. That wouldn't surprise Liz because I called her ass and I said, Liz, I'm down bad. It's like, I don't know how I'm going to make it through, but just know if my energy's a little off, I'm doing my best. And she was so supportive of me throughout the entire tour. I feel like there were constant moments where like I would be in a space theoretically should be happy, but I was feeling upset or feeling down. And she was just my rock in a time when I was like away from my parents, I'm away from my friends, I'm away from my home base, which is the thing that brings me comfort. And so, I mean, it's interesting, now I'm going through a whole different thought process of, do you go through things that those around you don't know? And I've been blessed to the point where I feel so comfortable around the people I surround myself with, where I never feel like I'm alone in those situations. So that would probably be mine.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Liz.
I don't know if it's going to surprise Jasmine either because she knows, which by the way, she managed to keep her energy up and her like entertainment skills, like even through all of that, which was amazing. But like it won't surprise her either because I was really in a funk and there was one of the shows where I did not want to do stand up before the show. And I was like, Jasmine, I'm not doing stand up. I'm not doing stand up for the show. It was our Nashville show. It was like, I'm not doing any stand up before the show. I'm not feeling it. Something just feels off. And I think there was also just the overwhelm of being in my home state. My nieces were there. Like there was just a lot happening. And she was like, that's cool. And she went on stage and she did all the stand up and brought me up anyway. And it ended up being one of the best shows of the tour. Mm-hmm. And it was great. But the fact that, again, Jasmine is that supportive and that rather than just being like, wow, you're throwing off our schedule or any of that, she knew we were going to fill those 10 minutes. Like she knew we were going to make it up in other ways and trusted me in that. And I could trust her that she was going to still be supportive of me, even though I was in a funk. And I was like, I don't want to do my stand-up portion for the beginning of the show because I'm just feeling weird. And that she could just be there and be supportive for me. And even though I was very last minute, just being like, I'm changing things up.
All the way up, right?
Right.
And it even goes another layer too, because that audience, they only know what you guys show. And so that's what they get.
I think the best part, because as I said, when it comes to stand-up comedy, Jasmine is the superior one. And I think the fun thing about that show was the number of people came up to me and were telling me about her stand-up. And it just put her like on a pedestal and on a highlight, which was not something I thought about until after the show. And then I was like really happy that it happened that way. Rather than me going up there in a funk and not doing my best, the fact that she got to shine in an individual way that wasn't upstaged or downplayed by anybody else. And so that made her stand out. So then it ended up being an amazing, like, unintended consequence that I was really happy about at the end of the day.
So, you're right. I didn't even think about it like that.
Yeah.
I'm just stuck on the natural back and forth and partnership and support of you all. And I think, again, as you guys remember, there was a woman in the audience who drove 4.5 hours to the DC show.
Yes, that was
I'll never forget
wild.
that woman. She spitted her whole family tree in 3 minutes. I was like, dang, how do you even know who your great great is? That's crazy.
She was so cool, and I have a picture of her with her jacket that she had made, and like I had my Black Woman on a Mission sweatshirt on, and like that was really cool to have somebody come that far. But we also had 3 Dutch guys there who were visiting from Holland.
I remember that.
I was like, and then we also had a very famous climate activist from Germany there, which was under the radar to folks because she had her baseball cap on and was really low key. So that was just really cool seeing who turned up at the DC show was pretty awesome, as well as my friend Elizabeth, who is a German journalist, a very well-known German journalist as well as content creator. And so it was really great to see the different, like you said, there was a diverse group there, and that was really cool.
Yeah. And you brought up something. Can you just lay out some of the nuances between traditional media and content creation?
Traditional media. Traditional media does not like us. There have been some very nasty hit pieces from traditional media, especially content creators at the DNC. I think that there's not one way to lay it out because unfortunately what is happening is traditional media is just looking at influencers, content creators as the exact same thing, and we're not. It would be like, tell me the difference between traditional stage actors and everyone in Hollywood, right? Which would encompass TV stars, movie stars, singers, dancers, right? We all have a different niche. And the problem right now is that we're being put in a box that doesn't exist. And so, like, I had a journalist ask, like, well, don't you just repeat what we post in our articles anyway and put the articles like on your videos? And I said, actually, a lot of the times I'm finding, well, it surprised like a journalist that who asked, who not in this rude way, but I was at the Atlantic Festival. The Atlantic folks were excellent. They were great. I love the fact that they welcomed content creators into their space and invited us. But I told them about this situation, and I was like, the funny thing is, I personally go to primary sources first, reading Supreme Court cases, legislation, legislative history, the statute, and then I reverse kind of engineer it. I search for journalist articles that will best explain what I know to be accurate. I don't look to them to see what the truth is. I sort through and say, this article is the best one. So then I can give my audience who are lay people something to read that's not the Supreme Court case. And so they were surprised to find that out. I'm like, no, I don't just pick your thing and learn about it. I actually go to the primary source. That's what I do as a lawyer. There might be someone who works in a totally different space, maybe beauty influencer space, or someone who does pop culture. Everyone's going to do things very differently. But there is definitely some tension, especially now that Substack exists, and I have started my Substack. I don't even want to think about what traditional media is going to think, but they definitely, we butted heads. I'm just going to say that. And I've had many great experiences with people from traditional media who covered me and my DNC stuff and other stuff I've done very well. Time Magazine, shout out to you. ABC News, shout out to you and Brianna. And of course, it was a Black woman journalist who covered me well. Like, ooh, shocker. CNN, awesome. There were other, traditional media. And like I said, The Atlantic was very welcoming and great. Wall Street Journal, great. But there have been others that have definitely just wanted to take jabs at us. So sorry, that was a long answer that you probably were not looking for. But there's some stuff happening there.
Yeah, but one thing about lawyers, you guys are going to do your research, and so you have your receipts.
If there's one thing Liz is going to do is read a document. It don't matter how many pages. I said, Liz, how'd you find out about Project 2025? Or how'd you learn all this stuff about it? She's like, I read all 334 pages. She said, how'd you find out? I said, I watched your video. To read that?
Reliable sources.
Right.
So here's the thing, though. So if you were given a do-over, would you make your test disappear? The test that you each shared.
Oh, I'll flat out say no. Just because, like I said, it had that amazing result of highlighting Jasmine. And just that alone was worth it.
I love that, Liz. I don't know. This is a complicated answer because all of me knows that I wouldn't be where I was today if I didn't go through the hard things that I went through. But sometimes it's almost just like, I wish I could learn that lesson without the difficulty. I don't know. It's just every day it's a blessing to teach yourself that you can go beyond the bounds of what you think you can do. Like when I initially was going through that, I was like, I don't even know how I'm going to get out of bed. But then I ended up going to 5 different cities. Well, that month I was doing a whole bunch of other stuff too. I also went to LA. I went to Dayton for just regular comedy shows outside of the tour. I know Liz was doing a whole bunch of stops for the Harris campaign. And so I think it's a blessing to show myself that I can do hard things. But I almost feel like as Black women and even just as a human being, sometimes I wish life didn't have to be hard. So I guess I wouldn't change it, but I don't know. I still go back and forth.
Yeah. Well, this has been phenomenal. Thank you both, Jasmine and Elizabeth, for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. This is great.
Yes, I love it. And how can listeners keep up with you guys each, and how can they keep up with your upcoming shows?
For me, they can follow me on my Instagram. It's Jazzy Beats with 2 Y's and 2 S's. And then my TikTok is Finesquire, Finesquire.
So you can find me on Substack now, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. I'm on Blue Sky because we're all apparently going to migrate over from Twitter because that man crazy. But everywhere is Booker Squared, BOOKERSQUARED on all of the platforms except for Twitter. It's Booker_squared because I got banned the first time from bullying Scott Baio, so I'm probably going to leave before I get banned again.
Thank you. Thank you again to both of you guys. And before we wrap, I'd like to remind listeners that a single leap of faith can change your life, and you never know how your courage can inspire someone else. Do you have a story that you'd like to share? Then send me a 60 to 90 second note that I can read to listeners in a crowdsourced segment called The Radical Report. It's about your most recent or memorable radical act and why it was worth it. You can also DM me an audio note, and if you want to stay anonymous, you can. And today we have a short and sweet report from Skyla Perrin. She writes, "My radical act was leaving a relationship that held me back from what I really needed. So I took the courage to leave when I didn't want to, but ultimately had to. I understood that he was great for the 19-year-old Skyla, but not future Skyla who wants to be married. I knew he wasn't it." Thank you for that.
Wow. Skyla, as someone that is 29 years old and just learned how to do that, I appreciate and admire your ability to make a difficult decision. That is absolutely amazing, especially at the age of 19. That's a pivotal age where oftentimes women get stuck in relationships they shouldn't be in for fear of being alone. And you just took a bet on yourself that a lot of people fail to take. And so shout out to you. That was very inspiring to hear.
And thanks so much for listening. And please subscribe to Radical Acts Uncut wherever you stream your audio, and follow the show on Instagram at Radical Acts Uncut. And remember to embrace the beauty and the mess.